Data protection is a top priority with today's work-from-home workforce. However, current data loss prevention tools inadequately protect data in cloud or SaaS offerings from insider threats. Secure Circle automatically protects data as it leaves SaaS services such as GitHub, AWS, and Salesforce. The protection is transparent to users and works with any application to persistently protect data, even source code. Secure your data with Secure Circle's Zero Trust Data Protection. Begin your 30-day free trial by visiting securityweekly.com/Secure Circle. You want to get the right things done for your security program. Sounds simple, but what are the right things for you? What does done mean? And how are you going to get there? Rapid7 realizes more than anyone how hard this can be. While Rapid7's Insight platform offers you industry-leading vulnerability management and detection and response solutions, their focus is on understanding where you are so that they can help you get where you're going. Visit securityweekly.com/Rapid7 to get started. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. A reminder to engage with the Security Weekly folks. You can go to securityweekly.com/subscribe. You can join our mailing list. You can join our Discord server and subscribe to all of our shows on securityweekly.com/subscribe. Also, if you have a specific guest or topic you'd like to see on our shows, you can go to securityweekly.com/guest, complete the form, and we'll review those and get that on the show where appropriate. Bradon Rogers is here with us. He joined Mimecast in March from the startup D2IQ, where he led global sales engineering, product marketing, and sales enablement organizations focused on technologies in the cloud-native DevOps space. He joins us today to talk about cloud-based cyber resilience. You can find out more about Mimecast and their awesome solutions at securityweekly.com/Mimecast. Bradon, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Paul. Hope you're doing well today.
Yes, I hope you are as well. Bradon, I wanted to start just by having you go through your background. It seems like you've worked in security for a number of years. So if you tell us a little bit about your background in security.
Yeah, I've been blessed to be in cybersecurity for I guess, 20 years or so now at this point. I was blessed early on to, kind of out of college. My first gig was a coding gig, and I got to spend a lot of time writing C code, but I got to experiment with a lot of things. This is the late 90s, and was able to be part of deploying some early gateways, early firewall technologies, and used to do a lot of work with packet filtering and things along those lines early on, and just kind of learned some of the nascent early on aspects of just how things work in the IT organization. And I just kind of took a fascination to security. And a friend of mine and I started up a website. It was an early site called rootshell.com, and we kind of hosted some early exploits and other how-tos on the site. And
I used Rootshell quite a bit back in the day.
Yeah. So a good friend of mine and I started that, and we didn't anticipate it taking off like it did. And we hosted it inside the company and didn't expect it. We didn't know there was that much interest, and we had a blast with it. But kind of moved on a little bit, and got to explore other parts of IT, and then joined cybersecurity again, the early 2000s, kind of just, I never lost my interest, and was able to join a couple of early startups, Cypher Trust out of Atlanta, early email security company. And some of you guys may recall that, but it's interesting. It's kind of my roots. I did a lot of work with email security, even back at that previous startup I mentioned before, where I did, send mail relays and things along those lines. So I got to learn email early on, and I've watched the evolution of email through a few roles. I took on a role as we were acquired by a company called Secure Computing, and then McAfee acquired Secure Computing. And throughout my career, really had a heart for sales engineering. But obviously, that has allowed me to stay close to the tech as well. So expanded my view a bit as I went to work for McAfee as it was acquired by, or Secure Computing was acquired by McAfee. And then, just continued to grow my career and take on more and more, and ran product marketing at McAfee as well as sales engineering. And then I had an opportunity to go to some areas that I knew well and focus on, and join Blue Coat with some good friends. And then as a result of that acquisition by Symantec, Blue Coat joined there. And I've kind of been all over the map, career-wise, technologically, but I've been able to get some good diverse experience and grow and meet with some of the biggest CISOs on the planet and some of the hardest challenges in the security ecosystems they have. And I've been very blessed, to be very candid. And I took a little foray last year into just a startup, just to get some DevOps experience, and spent a year getting a PhD in DevOps, and the opportunity came to join Mimecast. And as I started looking at Mimecast, it's just an interesting company, just fascinating. A company that's 17 years old, founded in 2003, and it's had the same CEO, same group of leadership, and you don't find that in security. And it was just really fascinating to me the journey this company's been on, and it kind of took me full circle back to my email roots as a good part of that. So that's where I am today. But I've had the blessing of being on shows such as this, and doing some media work, and writing a book several years ago on security. So just kind of been all over the map. It's been a great experience, great ride.
Yeah, Bradon, it's a good segue. Mimecast 17 years, and I've always recognized the Mimecast brand. It's changed for, I think, the good in the past 17 years, specifically with a lot of acquisitions and integrating that technology. And I was wondering if you could run down for our audience that, may be new to the newer things that Mimecast is doing. What are the various components, and how have some of the acquisitions been integrated?
Yeah, so I'd say if you look at Mimecast early in its iteration as a company, real heavy focus on SMB and mid-market. And I think Mimecast has done a great job for many, many years of I'd say almost dominating that segment of email security. But over the years, you think about things that are adjacent to what email security is all about. There's a heavy focus out of the gate to focus on archival. Why not? You're already seeing all the emails, so if you can develop archival and continuity capabilities through the work you're doing as an email gateway, it makes a lot of sense. So there were some early on additions to being an email gateway that allowed them to kind of expand the portfolio, but really a kind of heavy focus on email security for the past 17 years. And over the past few years, there's been a really a good reshaping of the company by the leadership of the company. That was one of the things that attracted me to Mimecast. Was I've spent a lot of time in my career selling to large enterprise and solving broad problems, and not really focusing on any one silo. And I do believe when you're building a portfolio, from a vendor standpoint, you look at the customer problems that they have, and you ask, are there adjacencies that are relative to your own experience or expertise? And there were a lot of things that made a lot of sense, and you could see some of the evolution in the space around things that were helping, make the email experience better, but also that were adjacencies. So, for example, Mimecast began to build out a footprint, a homegrown footprint, for the most part, of web security. And think about the marriage of, you guys can kind of appreciate this, is while I think sometimes maybe we neglect and we think as an industry that email, it's kind of, it's been around a long time. It's one of the oldest protocols on the internet, and we kind of get excited about shiny toys. Email is kind of the most rich part of the email of the landscape, I should say, of technology. And you think about what's within that. It's a treasure trove of information still to this day. We all depend on it in the enterprise and even down market. But web made a lot of sense to grow into, because what you think about the two attack vectors, they're probably the two most exploited attack vectors on the planet. They make a lot of sense to deliver security for those together. So Mimecast went on a journey to build out a web gateway footprint married into the email footprint, literally leveraging the exact same console. So it was a good expansion, but it was a good expansion in an adjacency. And then you start seeing additional additions through both organic and inorganic activity. So some acquisitions in the area of things like DMARC. You think about the purpose of DMARC in the email space to create a little bit more of a validation of, is this indeed the organization sending to you, or is it someone spoofing that organization? So went on acquisition and acquired a company focused on DMARC. And you can think about where DMARC is. DMARC's focused on protecting the brand. And so you think about what kind of adjacencies might make sense there. It would be great to get some intelligence on where brand exploitation is occurring. And so they acquired a company around brand exploit prevention or protection. And so you can start thinking about like this kind of journey now that the company's been on. Is it started with email, ventured into web, and start thinking about how those things, that world of email and web, get exploited. Well, it's because people are able to take advantage of brand usage and dupe the end user into falling victim for things like impersonations. And so if you look at just the general acquisition framework, it's been really focused on continuing to augment that area. And one last thing I guess I'll mention here is, we kind of wrap it up with a couple of other capabilities I think that are important. We made an acquisition about a year ago or so around awareness training. And you think about kind of at the core, since the days I've started in cybersecurity, was always kind of trying to get the user to be aware of the landscape around them. And that's all great, but it's really important to have that experience of training my users be a little more realistic in a real world. So the company went on a journey of acquiring a company around awareness training to be able to help marry that real life experience of what's happening in the email to teaching the users better practices. Oh yeah, that's a bad link you clicked there. You shouldn't have clicked that, and here's why. Campaigning real world phishing scenarios against the users. And so that acquisition happened about a year ago, and then we made another one a few months ago, which has been great, a company called Message Control. And if you think kind of about how email security has functioned for many years up to this point, you think most vendors have sat at a gateway and a perimeter type of function. But you think of the expansion of where the users engage and this movement to Office 365. And you see this evolution to this space called CESS, Cloud Email Security Supplements, which is a Gartner term. But in the CESS space, you have a variety of different smaller vendors that are doing some really interesting innovations, but they're usually isolated off to the side, not doing much with the email gateway vendors. So we acquired a company called Message Control to kind of expand and become a more fully featured platform for email security in this particular case. But now where I have a gateway deployment and I have a deployment that ties straight into Office 365 or the backend email infrastructure. And as we begin to marry these two together, I get full visibility of email as it moves horizontally and vertically through the environment. So
it's an interesting question.
It's not your grandfather's Oldsmobile anymore.
Right. And it's an interesting question that we have been kind of batting around is when I apply email security, do I do it at the gateway level like we always did it, right? And insert gateways in between there and do it in the routing portion? Or do I use an API integration into my cloud email provider and provide security there? Your answer was interesting, and there was very good reasons behind why essentially you need both, right? Is the messaging now from Mimecast, right?
Yeah, I would say, look, everybody has different needs. As you are as you're an SMB, you may not have the appetite or the stomach or the resources in your organization to consume a full-on email gateway. Certainly, I think that has been a great place where Office 365 has thrived with some of its core protective capabilities. And certainly, most of those organizations, or many of them, find the need to still augment that. And that's why they've turned to that CESS space. And, it's great because it gives us the option of deploying in those organizations, without a SEG as a standalone CESS provider. But as you go up market, you start seeing more and more organizations that have their email gateways are turning to a different vendor for their CESS technologies in a non-integrated way. And they don't like that non-integrated experience. So it gives them the capability, like you're saying, to have both and kind of be able to have the best of both worlds there. And I think that's definitely the journey that we're on with that acquisition.
Right, because on the relay side, you've got a chance to intercept that before it gets delivered, right? On the API and integration side, that message has to be delivered before you can do anything with it, right?
Correct. Yeah, and I think you think about, there's a number of ways to instrument yourself inside of Office 365 as an example. You can leverage APIs, as you're talking about. You can also reshape the way the SNTP connectors route mail as well. So we do a little bit of both in that world. So it gives us the best of both worlds, being able to tie into the API as well as see the raw messages as they're passing before they actually make it to the user's mailbox. So the instrumentation in that world is just really fascinating because I think there's a perception, and I think it's a good reality. One of the reasons we acquired that is there are organizations that want a really simple, easy deployment. And if you look at what a lot of those vendors provide, in particular Message Control, we're talking about a deployment you can do in 5 to 10 minutes. And I'm not kidding when I say 5 to 10 minutes. And that's the simplicity of something like that world is providing. And that's why it's so attractive to a lot of organizations.
I want to talk about the kind of awareness training and the ability to basically run your own phishing campaigns, right? Because a lot of these capabilities you can buy individual vendors, right, or get point-in-time tests. But in the Mimecast platform, I can see a phishing attack that comes through, and then I can replicate that and replay that. Did I capture that correctly? Yeah,
correct. I mean, that was always the vision with this. Was we didn't ever believe that the capability of training my users should be some isolated, siloed function, which is what happens in many orgs. I think about a world, like I can envision a really great world, and this is where we're going right now with a capability we just announced recently called SafePhish, where I start tying in the awareness training capabilities to the email gateway. Today, we're already doing great capabilities in our email gateway where I coach users through the bad links they click. So I'm seeing a lot of that stuff. So what we're doing with SafeFish is now drawing closer integration where I can pull out real-time phishing examples that are being used against my organization and campaign them, make them inert, remove the malicious content, but yet still use those in campaigns against my users and see my good and bad users are. That's really interesting. But I started imagining a world where it could take us, and as you start visioneering this out, the great thing is I'm seeing within the world of email, all the users' good and bad clicks. It is probably the starting point for 90+ percentile of the attacks that are successful. And think about email, it's the richest landscape on the planet for the attacker to begin their path. So I can see the users' good and bad clicks. I can also see who's failing and passing their awareness training, both real life phishing campaigns as well as the content we pass to them. So as we might all agree, one of the biggest vulnerable attack surface areas in the organization is the user and their willingness to do things that otherwise we wouldn't like them to do. If I can identify who my risky users are and understand who my vulnerable attack surface area is, I can begin to build and shape policies around my most susceptible users more effectively and give more freedoms to users who are part of my control surface where they're actually effectively a security control because they're so good at their awareness.
Yeah.
So yeah, back to your question, I think that is a big part of the journey that we're on. And I think you think of how that ties into email, we can see a vision where that starts tying into web as well. Imagine a world where, I start, performing browser isolation for the users who constantly click the malicious stuff that we keep stopping. And I ensure they live in a nice, safe sanctuary to be protected from the attackers that are sending malicious content their way.
Well, and I mean, users talk, and you should talk to your users, because what I find is the folks that struggle with the security awareness training, some of that can be a language barrier, by the way, right? They're asking their coworkers, like, what's the answer to that question? Not like, I don't understand. And they may get past the test, but when a real phishing attack comes through, they're going to click on it. So having that intelligence of both who's doing well and not doing well in security awareness and how their behavior is in real phishing attacks is a huge piece of missing information, I think, in a lot of organizations.
Yeah, I think the failure, I think you called it out perfectly in a lot of words, is the content they provide can be easily passed by a lot of people without having to do a lot of even studying for the work, because the answers are fairly obvious. But when you put it into real practice, the answers aren't so obvious. It's not like the attackers are looking for the easy, obvious answer to be found by everybody. Now, in some cases, they do. It's really interesting. I've thought a lot about this over the years, like with those Nigerian scams. Like you kind of think about it, there's a lot of reason why that might be obvious, why they want that to be obvious, so that they kind of weed out the intelligent users up front. So that if they can dupe you on the front end part of it, then they're probably going to get you on the back end. But I think in general, kind of what you're calling out is the real live phishing simulation part of it lets me leverage techniques that the real attackers are leveraging and see who really would be falling victim to the things otherwise we wouldn't want them to fall victim to.
Matt?
Yeah, and we were talking with CyberArk on the previous segment about this concept of adaptability, right? We don't want to put too much friction in place for our users, right? We want them to continue to do their thing. But if I understand who my risky users are or what risky activities some of these users use, and I can adapt policies to put better protections around them, maybe that's a good thing, right? Because email is one of these big areas that we've struggled with for a long time. That adaptability of looking at different pools of users and applying different policies could actually help organizations do a better job of protecting some of their users.
Yeah, entirely. And I think part of the problem is the lack of an ecosystem or capability broadly to draw some of these things together. So it's great you see the email clicks, but if it's not tied to your awareness training or to your web or to other vectors in the organization, your endpoints or other things, you don't really get much from that. You deal with all these problems in silos. So I think the industry's done a really good job of starting to draw ourselves more toward platform-oriented architectures that are real, not the traditional marketing term of platform, but where vendors are drawing things together. And we're seeing that work very effectively we're building a whole ecosystem of partners that in their own world, they have their own, what they call a platform. And we're able to share intelligence effectively across that and start to draw a picture together, like you're calling out there, where, I can identify this user is more risky because they're willing to click, they open these payloads, these types of better telemetry is being shared across the environment. One thing we're focused on right now is something we're rolling out now too, is something called SafeScore. SafeScore is kind of that, it's a really good platform visualization as my users click, as they pass training, as they fail training, as they engage in other types of activity in the organization, as we instrument control over them. The ability for a SafeScore to increase or decrease based on the propensity or the behavior of the user combined with the control surface they have allows me to then hone in more effectively, because now I'm considering the impact of a variety of different controls in there. And I think that's kind of the most important part of this as we start thinking about the industry. You sure many of your other vendors that you've had on before have talked through the importance of integration and ecosystems. And we no less think that's important, especially as you go into the high-end enterprise.
Yeah. Well, we definitely heard it in the last segment on the identity side. Sounds like you're doing some of the same things at Mimecast on the email and the web aspects of that, and bringing those capabilities together, creating a broader set of capabilities. Again, there's some great point solutions out there. There's some great innovation out there. But if they're not integrated well together, are you truly extracting all the value out of all those standalones? It looks like what Mimecast has done is really tried to integrate that and provide much more value in an integrated approach.
Yeah, I do think that when done properly, it can allow you to drive instant innovation in a lot of areas where there may be a new startup, maybe something really fascinating. You'll have your core control sets in your environment. You'll have your core email vendor you trust. You'll have your core web gateway vendor you trust. We'd like to think that's us. You'll have your core awareness training vendor and others, and you'll have your core endpoint, et cetera. But when a new innovative technology arises, the ability to quickly consume their machine algorithms, the ability to consume their version of X, Y, or Z, when you do that properly, is great, because not only can you consume their protection, but you can consume their visibility and start getting a better picture of what's in store for the organization as the users engage on a day in, day out basis.
Bradon, many of us, I think, agree that email is still the primary attack vector, right? Because it largely works. However, we have seen other attack vectors that still fall in the category of phishing. We've seen attackers kind of go back and rely on voice, which is interesting. In an article called That New, I'm like, it's actually where the first hackers kind of got, cut their teeth, there was only telephones before the internet, right? And I have seen, and many of us have gotten the text messages, hey, claim your package kind of thing. What is your thinking in terms of Mimecast for how you might support some of the other avenues of phishing beyond email?
Yeah, perfect question. We firmly believe that expansion into other protocols is critical. And, I do believe, you can look at LinkedIn as a good example. That's a great attack surface area. It's still used commonly. It's used for a lot of intel gathering as well, but, certainly malicious links make their way there. There are other vectors, and certainly that's an area we think is really fascinating, and we're exploring right now as we look at the landscape to identify, are there other interesting platform communication and or collaboration platforms that are commonly in use where our same stack could apply? Because the reality is the protocol that we're ingesting right now is SMTP. Mm-hmm. There's nothing to say the protocol we're ingesting couldn't be X, Y, or Z. Mm-hmm. The same as we're doing with web. The protocol we're ingesting for web is HTTP. We're using the same stack and the same policies under the covers. So that same type of mindset can be applied to other protocols. And that is definitely a direction we're exploring right now is how we attack that. Particularly as we get to more of a work from home scenario, as collaboration platforms become more and more important, where you're not physically seeing users. The collaboration world is exploding right now, obviously, for obvious reasons. So.
I think the collaboration platforms, I think certainly as we're seeing, right, everyone has their own kind of, take on that in different technologies. You look at just chat, right? I mean, you can go back to IRC, through Jabber, through Slack, through Discord, through Microsoft Teams, through, all these different technologies. I think it's actually one thing that's probably helping us right now is that everyone's kind of adopting these different technologies where email's email, right? Still uses SMTP. We're standardized on that protocol. There could come a time where there is a more popular communications mechanism that people are standardizing on. I think we're still kind of feeling the waters out, to be honest.
I would agree with you right now. And I think a good example is just look at what we're doing for day-to-day collaboration right now. Some orgs use WebEx, some use Zoom, mm-hmm. some use Microsoft Teams, maybe some use even some others that I'm not mentioning there. There is a settling in at least to 3 common platforms that I think as you want to protect something that, it becomes easier to pick. The audience self-selects for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we'll start seeing some more of that. We're already seeing it in some areas, like, good example, Slack. Like a lot of organizations have really moved to adopt Slack and use it heavily, especially in COVID. I've got a lot of friends that have commented that their org was not using Slack in a wholesale way prior to the work from home, and now is really going heavy to adopt it. So yeah, I think it's a very interesting observation, and one I think we're really ready to attack as a company, because again, the way we instrument ourselves, both within the cloud and how our stack functions, is the connectors, the ingestion protocols can be different, yet the same machine can be used under the covers to inspect.
Mm. In terms of the web filtering, when and where and how are you looking at the URL? Is that like once it gets delivered in the email, or is it also I have a website and you're looking at maybe the attacks coming at my website? Like in what context are you analyzing malicious URLs?
Yeah, we look at URLs in a variety of different ways. The first thing is obviously as an email comes in, we begin to rip the email apart and look for its constituent parts, things like the header and the body attachments, et cetera, and look for things like URLs. In those places. So like, for example, in the body of an email, we'll inspect that URL. We're already proactively using our intelligence capabilities, proactively scouring the internet, looking for, sources that would, be a malicious link we don't want users to click on. So we're rewriting those URLs in the first place. And, we're forcing, with our URL protect, the capability of a user clicking a link and, proactively being protected in that click that link. As we rewrite that URL, we send them back through a portal and tell them, hey, is this link good or bad? Mm-hmm. And if we can do coaching actively, that's one of the core capabilities there, is in the purpose of the rewrite is to help coach the users, and then allow them to get the things or block them from the bad things they shouldn't be getting to. It's interesting because that's being fed from a variety of different places, but it's also feeding other things. So the work and the research we're doing to grab intelligence from a variety of different sources is empowering things like the web. So you can think about it like as I see the environment every single day, or as I have my cloud stood up every day protecting 40,000 organizations, we see 600 million emails delivered each day, 600 million plus. So you can think about the rich intel I'm getting off of that, of just sheer URLs themselves. But we have other sources as well, some third party, some homegrown, even our area of brand exploit protection. So you think about what our brand exploit team does. Their whole job is to, you tell us your domain names, we'll look and monitor your domain names. And when malicious infrastructure stood up, leveraging what looks like your domain names, we're going to identify that for you and let you know. So if you've got a really well-known domain name and someone uses Unicode to make it look like a particular character, but even though it's not your domain name, it looks like it, or something that sounds like it, or a .NET version and it's not yours, we'll let you know about that. But that same intel is being fed on the back end back to email and to web to protect as well. So there's a variety of different sources where those URLs come from, but that's allowing us to block literally 20, 30 billion attacks of threats a month, and it's pretty fascinating. Out of that, there's 1 million, 2 million impersonation attacks each day that are coming through there, that again, leveraging what look like legitimate emails, legitimate URLs, legitimate headers, and the user clicks on it and finds himself in a bad place.
And are you allowing customers to proactively define something as bad and then feeding that back into the intelligence? Like if I saw a URL and was like, well, we're kind of on the fence, or it looks okay, and then that organization does some investigation, said that was actually a malicious URL, does that get fed back into Mimecast?
Yeah, so capability we've been working to build. We've had some capabilities for years on that front, but we're reshaping them a bit. A capability called Turbo, which allows the users to engage in that process. So if something makes it to their desk, obviously that they didn't want, they can engage directly and feedback straight into the Mimecast research team. And the machinery that our research team has done ensures that message now, obviously, the intel is gleaned off of that message. And as a result, we're able to effectively protect those users from future types of attacks that may look similar. So again, it allows the users to play a part in being the control set, because, there's nothing that's 100% effective. So, hopefully we can leverage those users who've been effectively trained to be a last ditch stop in that. And so it's a really good capability there. In addition to, now users identified something, they've said it's bad. We agree it's bad. we also have capabilities for remediation now to allow both the organization as well as our own team to perform remediation, so we can then hunt across the email boxes in the organization where that email may have landed in somebody else's user email box, waiting to detonate, waiting on someone to click that bad link. We can go hunt the environment proactively, looking for those things and stop those from threatening the other users as well.
Yeah, that's super important. You don't want someone to come back from vacation and then like reinfect the entire environment, right? So,
well, it's interesting. What you just hit there is really interesting, because if you look at the problem with standard email gateways, they protect at a moment in time. They protect at the moment where they saw something good or bad, and they either flagged it, stopped it, whatever, or they let it through. And we never view that as an acceptable point of view. Even when it rests in the user's email box, that email may have started out with a point of view that that's actually okay, or it could have been a little bit gray, but we let it through, or someone let it through. But we may see more of that across the internet. Others may report it. Why not have the capability of saying, all right, well, now that thing has turned to something a little bit more threatening that we know about. Standard seg would have let it through, and you would just, unfortunately, users are going to click it. This allows us to continually be monitoring for the things that we see as future threats, and as we learn about something new. I would love to have intelligence from tomorrow today.
Right.
I don't have that luxury, so this kind of gets me the second best thing in that example, where now, I can kind of do that. I get at least the benefit of a look back and still can go remediate against. The acquisition of message control gets us a lot of that as well. So that was a really attractive part of that, where we get the ability to dynamically still change things like headers and warnings for users. Even though the first user clicked it and got this may be suspicious, the next user could click it and get something, do not click this link, it's bad, or we can remediate and clean it up.
Right.
That's awesome.
Again, that adaptive ability, right? Email might have gotten through, but the threat associated with that email changed. Therefore, I can change the user experience or message so that it doesn't continue to propagate.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too. I think we're in an interesting time in security, and I got to glean some of this from my DevOps work that I was doing in the open source universe. We've gotten a lot more mature in our machine capabilities and the ability to drive great intelligence off the data we have, and let more automated adaptive capability take over. I'm not saying you never take your hand off the wheel. I'm not saying you don't pay attention, but I do think we're now seeing a generation of technologies where I can be a lot more nimble and adapt and let the technology shape how they adapt against the threat landscape that's constantly adapting as well. So that, I think a lot of that has a good deal to do with where we are as an industry, allowing us to evolve into that space very effectively, and organizations are ready for that as well.
It's awesome. Bradon, anything else you'd like to share with our audience today?
No, I think first of all, I'd just like to say I appreciate you guys having us on. I'm excited about the opportunity to speak with you. I think the big thing for us is, as you look at us from an enterprise standpoint, and I know that the title of the show has enterprise in it. That's a big place we've been succeeding inside of Mimecast with our story. You think about where we live. We live at the perimeter. We live at security inside the perimeter, as I talked about before, and we live at security beyond your perimeter with our brand protection. And the story's playing very well in some of the largest enterprises in the world now. We've been seeing some great opportunities and some great wins in some of the biggest companies on the planet. So, like I said, it's no longer your grandfather's Oldsmobile. Like I said earlier, we're a big mainstay enterprise player, and we're excited about being successful in that space as well. So look forward to hopefully getting to chat some of you guys about what we're doing at Mimecast.
Fantastic. For listeners that want to learn more, go to securityweekly.com/Mimecast. Bradon, thank you very much for appearing on the show today. That will conclude Enterprise Security Weekly for today. Thanks, everyone, for listening and watching. We'll see you next time.